up to speed and making its whole user experience much smoother. So that truly is the big story, not just of the day, but for quite some time now, because the journey to privatize Air India has been a long, painful and arduous one. It has required the government to step back several times, relook at what it was offering and be flexible depending on what the market was willing to put forward. It also came with its, I would say, political baggage, because Air India is the national carrier. So who are you selling it to? Will it continue to be the national carrier? What about the brand name? What about the employees? And a lot of those concerns have gotten addressed today. So the news, of course, is that the Tata Group and the Tata Sons SPV specifically was the highest bidder, the other being a consortium led by SpiceJet chief Ajay Singh. So the Tatas did bag Air India for a consideration of a little over 18,000 crore rupees. They also take on about 15,000 crore rupees of debt and will pay 2,700 crore rupees in cash. The government, meanwhile, will hive off the rest of the debt, which is about 46,000 crore rupees, into another special purpose vehicle. That's how the deal is structured. The Tata Group will have to keep on employees of Air India for at least a year, and after that, in year 2, they can offer them VRS or other options. They also have to keep on the brand name for at least 5 years, and if they do choose to part with the brand name post then, it will have to be only to an Indian entity. So a lot of details coming in, but what really is the implication of this massive deal? I caught up with a host of experts to analyze it further earlier in the day.
Well, the second question first. The significance of the deal is phenomenal. At multiple levels. Number one, of course, there is the end of the financial bleed that on the exchequer, which in itself is enormous. So that in itself is something. Even if everything else was negative, that itself I think justifies the deal. The second is that the Prime Minister has been consistently saying that there is no business, government has no business to be in business. And I completely agree. And more so in a service industry like the aviation industry, where you have to be nimble, you have to be agile. So it's very difficult for the government to really compete in an open market in a service industry, in the civil aviation sector. So therefore, this is the second very important achievement today, that government is getting out of something that is not part of its core competence. The third big thing about this that so while Air India was there, and it was making losses and everything, however, it was always the blue-eyed boy. There were aviation, all the regulations, etc., were there for everyone else, but there was always a special dispensation for Air India. So there was no level playing field. There was no free open market. There was no competition. So that ends today. From today onwards, it's going to be a level playing field with everyone equally positioned. And finally, the Tatas have shown their business acumen, their success over the decades. They've been part of the nation building process. They know how to run businesses. They know how to run businesses well. So what we're going to see is, I think, a greater level of sanity in the aviation industry. Whether it's a product, pricing, or other decisions, they're going to be taken on the basis of economics, not on the basis of extraneous considerations, which is what happens when government is running things. There are always extraneous social obligations and so on. So this is going to restore sanity. It's going to restore a level playing field, and it's actually going to be better and for competition. It will improve competition. Now, and of course, at an emotional level, as you said, Ms. Tata has tweeted me that it's welcome back home, and there was no Tata, it was only a bye-bye and all of that stuff. So yeah, and it's in the fitness of things that there is a sense
let me read that out. Let me read that out. Mr. Mathur, give me a second. I also want to welcome Mark D. Martin onto the show, but just give me a second. Let me read out two important statements, one from Ratan Tata and one from Ajay Singh. Essentially, the two big names behind the two bids for Air India. So Ratan Tata puts out a statement saying, of course, welcome back Air India. And in that says, the Tata Group winning the bid for Air India is great news. While admittedly it will take considerable effort to rebuild Air India, It will hopefully provide a very strong market opportunity to the Tata Group's presence in the aviation industry. On an emotional note, Air India, under the leadership of Mr. J.R.D. Tata, had at one time gained the reputation of being one of the most prestigious airlines in the world. Tatas will have the opportunity of regaining the image and reputation it enjoyed in earlier years. Mr. J.R.D. Tata would have been overjoyed if he was in our midst today. We also need to recognize and thank the government for its recent policy of opening select industries to private sector. So, there is a recognition there that it is going to be a bit of a challenge, and a benchmark has been set to restore the glory of Air India. I quickly want to read out the statement from Ajay Singh, the other bidder, who says, I congratulate the Tata Group on winning the bid for Air India. Wish them all the success. It was my honor and privilege to be shortlisted for bidding for Air India. I'm confident that the Tata Group will restore the glory of Air India and make all of India proud. I would also like to congratulate the government on the successful divestment of Air India. They ran a transparent and flexible process and gave new impetus to India's disinvestment program. I've been an Air India fan all my life, and it's time for the Maharaja to reclaim its position as a leading airline of the world. So, two great statements there. Jitender Bhargava, former ED of Air India, also joining us on this show today. Someone who's been tracking this journey, I think, for decades. Mr. Bhargav, this is the big moment. And see the messaging. It's about restoration of glory of Air India, while admitting is going to be a challenge.
Well, there's no denying the fact of what has happened to the airline in the last couple of decades, with bureaucrats running the airline, no effort being made to stem down the losses or increase the market share, etc. It is going to be a formidable task for the Tatas. But the good part is that there were two bids. Tatas have been successful, and they're having the necessary wherewithal. The Air India will be looking forward to better times. And it's not just Air India, I would say, even India should be looking forward to, because what has happened in the last couple of decades is that we have yielded our Indian market, Indian skies, to the Gulf and Southeast Asian carriers, only because Air India could not grow for want of aircraft or want of cash. And the private airlines, unfortunately, were so keen or happy, content with flying to the Gulf countries and the Southeast Asian countries and not venturing to Europe, United States, Japan, Australia, etc., etc. So this is going to be a very, very healthy, happy moment for everyone in Indian aviation, and particularly for those who have worked with this Air India, who've been associated. And as somebody has very rightly said it, J.R.D. Tata would have been the happiest person if he was to see this development taking place today. He was not happy when Air India was acquired in 1953. He said so in his last speech at the AGM on 22nd June 1953, and how sad he was on the airline being taken over by the government. And today we have gone ahead, and I would like to quote only one thing. If 15th October 1932 heralded the birth of civil aviation in India, 1 week short of 89 years since then, 8th October 2021 will add a new big chapter in Indian civil aviation history, because we'll no longer have to rely on Gulf carriers, Southeast Asian carriers, because Air India on its own, under Tata's ownership, will grow once again. And I'm looking forward, like many of us would, to happier days for Indian aviation and for Air India.
Okay, let me read out a statement coming in just now from N. Chandrasekaran, chairman of Tata Sons, saying, at the Tata Group, we are delighted to be declared as the winner of the bid for Air India. This is a historic moment, and it will be a rare privilege for our group to own and operate the country's flag-bearer airline. It will be our endeavor to build a world-class airline which makes every Indian proud. On this occasion, I would like to pay tribute to J.R.D. Tata, pioneer of Indian aviation, whose memory we cherish. Mark T. Martin, as we celebrate the process of actually getting a disinvestment process through, which was honestly very challenging. The government had to go back to the drawing board several times. In 2017, they got 0 bids. In 2018, Indigo said, this is not our cup of tea. So just the fact that they've pushed it through with a marquee group like the Tatas is cause for celebration. But if we just pause and see what the Air India brand under the Tatas will have to contend with, since we're comparing it to the birth of the airline. This is today a very crowded market. There is a lot of competition. It's a tough market, still recovering from post-COVID-19 pandemic blues, where business travel may not recover to the same extent as it was before for several years. What are the challenges you see going forward?
Good evening, Tamanna. I think great news for Indian aviation. Thanks for having me today on ET Now. The Tatas that we will look at and the Air India under the Tatas is going to be a very strategic market offering, very similar to what we've seen with Lufthansa Group AG, where you have a main airline like Lufthansa that owns sub-airlines like Austrian, Swiss Air, Sun Express, and joint ventures with China Airlines and so on. So this is going to be possibly the most potent, powerful revival of an aviation airline icon, which was obviously the trendsetter and the benchmark for our region back in the 50s and 60s. The challenges coming up ahead, honestly, I really don't see any major challenge except for COVID. If COVID goes completely, out of control, but I think world governments and organizations and WHO have pretty much are working hard to keep that under control with newer and more potent vaccines and medication and so on. The positive upswing for Air India that I see is that we'll see Air India first take back whatever it's lost over the last 40 to 50 years. Routes in Africa, taking full advantage of bilaterals, taking full advantage of flights and routes over to Southeast Asia, Australia, the Pacific, and Latin America, restarting the Air India that the world appreciated and respected and as the finest product. That is going to be back now, and that's going to be charged with a Tata power. And we're talking about Tata, who has, fairly deep pockets. They've seen worse business turnarounds with Cisco and Telco and transiting, Telco into hybrid advanced automotive manufacturer today that owns Jaguar Land Rover. So I'm not really worried about Air India getting adequate backing or support. I think Air India is going to be overbacked, over-supported. Air India is going to be the blue-eyed boy of Tata's, and Air India is going to really be up to its max capacity. So I think from some perspective, it's going to be very good for India. Foreign exchange earnings will be up because Air India predominantly is an international airline. It's not a domestic airline. So we're going to see improved forex earnings like we did back in the 60s and 70s.
Yeah. Dhiraj Mathur, let me come to the deal as far as the Tatas are concerned. So two conditions, I would say. One is that they have to keep the Air India brand name for 5 years. But looking at their statements, I think they're more than happy to and proud to run the flag bearer of the nation. The other is that they have to hold on to all employees for at least a year. Do you see this as a challenge of any kind?
Well, you can look at the same thing from two different perspectives. I see this that a 1 year lock-in period, as far as the employees is concerned, is the sensible solution. I mean, it's going to take Air India a few months in any case to figure out who's worth keeping and who's not worth keeping, or rather who's, all those issues as far as the staff is concerned. It's not something that happens overnight. It's going to take time. So before you know it, it's going to take a few months, and HR decisions have forced to be taken with some level of sensitivity. So I think it's just a question of maybe a few months where the Tatas may have to hold on to employees that they would otherwise prefer to let go. So, but the flip side of it is that, it takes care of a lot of flack and a lot of opposition that would have needlessly held, slowed the whole process back and even potentially sabotaged the deal. So I think it's a sensible compromise. I mean, frankly speaking, that's my take on it. And after all, you have to admit the fact that they are human beings, they're employees, that they've been with the organization for all these years. So you do need to be fair to them, subject to limits, of course.
No, absolutely, absolutely. There is no doubt that everyone should get their right due, and to be perceived to be doing the right thing is also equally important. That no one is being short-shifted in this entire process. I think the significance and the symbolism of this also matters, doesn't it, Mark? Some of the queries always when talking about Air India's disinvestment was who would it go to? And here you're saying for 5 years the brand name remains, and even after that the brand name can go only to an Indian entity. So questions like, will it continue to be India's national flag bearer? Will it continue to represent India's interests? And who is the buyer when it's the Tata's Group, our own homegrown behemoths? It puts all of those questions to ease as well, doesn't it, Mark?
Yes, I think if you really look at it, the Air India brand will always be and continue to reside with India. Okay, I don't think anyone outside India is going to be really keen on taking it, because it's always been a unique GI that's been synonymous with hospitality and everything that came from India back in the good old days, and that's going to be revived. On the other bit that you mentioned, in terms of a 5 to 10 year outlook, I think more or less I really don't even see people as an issue, because Air India as a group has always been non-confrontational when it came to HR and people and manpower. And I think a lot of the employees and unions would have a sense of renewed passion and commitment for the airline, because Air India, let's be honest, was running to just about 50% capacity, and now it's going to be running at machine at 100% production. So we will see a complete attitudinal change. We will see a total shift in the way employees and unions themselves look at Air India. So I think that itself is positive. And I think we all know this from what we've seen in the past, right? From Tata's turning around of their own loss-making businesses, from Telco to Tisco to the Taj Hotels, IHCL. It's most of these baseline revenue brands for Tata has been driven by people, right? So it's the people, it's the brand, it's the product and service that Tata will reinstill back in Air India. So, and in one way, I think the level playing field where government protection of Air India goes, I think that's fantastic, because now Tata has become agile, aggressive, and become pretty lean, and will become mean in at least 5 to 10 years from now. And Tata is not looking at a return on investment of 5 to 7%. There's a difference between a Vyapari and a Udyogpati. An Udyogpati looks at a return of at least 25 to 30 years and stays invested. So you can't get a better combination than this. And I think from a long-term perspective, this is going to be very productive and very progressive for India. Yeah.
The challenge of what to do with the conundrum called Air India has plagued several governments for years. The national flag bearer, the national carrier, which has been bleeding losses for so many years. But the real idea, or the real strong idea,